friend. You're listening to The Sustainable Body Worker, the podcast for massage therapists who want to grow thriving, purpose-led businesses without the burnout. Here we talk about nervous system aligned business strategy, pricing that makes sense, client work that doesn't deplete you, and how to build a career that actually supports your life. I'm your host, Gretchen Popp, massage therapist, mentor, educator, and recovering overachiever. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Sustainable Body Worker. I just want to say thank you to start this episode off. I've been getting a lot of really incredible feedback since starting this podcast earlier this year, and I just want to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude for every single one of you who tunes in, whether it's for every episode or just the ones that sound interesting to you. And with the holidays coming up, things are feeling both very busy and exciting behind the scenes here at the Sustainable Body Worker. Kelsey and I have been cooking up something really fun for the new year. We're going to be having a free challenge for all of our listeners. Many more details to follow. We're very excited about it. But it is our fresh take on New Year's resolutions, something really simple, sustainable, and totally accessible for all of us body workers. So keep an eye out for that. Make sure to subscribe. And in the meantime, if there's an episode that resonated with you, or maybe even this one will, I'd love for you to share it with another massage therapist so that we can start the new year with even more listeners joining us for the challenge. Our listener count keeps on growing, and it is absolutely amazing to see how the Sustainable Body Worker message is spreading. So truly, thank you for sharing, for listening, and for just being a part of this community in general. I'd also really love to connect with more of you personally, so come find me on Instagram at sustainable.bodyworker. You can drop into the comments, you can share your takeaways, or even send me a DM to let me know what episodes have been the most helpful. Really, hearing your stories and feedback is genuinely meaning the world to me. It's been really cool connecting with everyone. Now, whether you are brand new here or have been listening from the beginning, being able to see how this resource has connected, inspired, and supported so many of you has been such a privilege, and I am so stinking grateful for this. And recently, I have been asked by one of our listeners something that I think a lot of people wonder when they're deep in a cycle of burnout and exhaustion, especially this time of year. And the question was, but how did you actually get yourself out of burnout? And I want to share that this was an evolutionary process for me. I went through many phases of healing and growth, and each one brought me to another rung of the healing ladder, so to speak, but there wasn't necessarily one moment where I was suddenly out of the burnout cycle. Now, I shared my story previously. However, it is really challenging to explain what has been really a over 10-year journey for me in micro podcast episodes. So my hope is through our time together, as I'm able to connect with you more and more, you'll be able to learn more and more details of this process for me. But there is a myth that I want to dispel here right now and speak to a little bit more. I think we often see burnout as a phase you're in. Something that you pass through and then one day you're just done. There's this idea that there could be an end to it. But really, what I've come to learn is that it's something we need to manage. And seeing it that way makes it much more manageable. And believe it or not, I actually had one of my worst fibromyalgia flares ever just a couple of weeks ago. And the difference between this experience and the first few times it happened to me was the awareness around what had actually caused it and how I reacted to it. This time, I was able to experience it for what it was. This was a temporary signal for me to look at, not a permanent issue I needed to hide from or resolve as quickly as possible and throw everything under the kitchen sink at it. Now, if you've listened to my previous episode where I've shared my personal experience with fibromyalgia and how it all started for me, you'll know that I went through some of my biggest flares around big shifts in my life. And at the time, I was too young and inexperienced to understand the correlation and actually work with it in a way that I have found to be the most productive. That awareness around where the syndrome was actually manifesting from has actually only developed for me recently after a lot of personal growth. And it's funny because if I were to look ahead from that time in my life when I was couch ridden for months in severe pain and tell myself, okay, in 15 years, you'll have gone through school for nutrition and clinical herbalism. You'll have done strength training for years, daily yoga for years. You'll have a solid meditation practice. You'll sleep well and take your supplements, and you'll still have a terrible flare. If I told myself that, I probably wouldn't have had the momentum or willpower to do all of those positive things for myself. But the truth is, my symptoms developed as a signal for my nervous system to tell me something. Not necessarily to stop what I was doing, but that something was making my nervous system feel unsafe. I think a lot of us get caught up in this concept that our symptoms always mean we should just rest. And sometimes, yes, that's exactly what's needed. But sometimes they can also mean that we're on to something really good, something that's about to stretch us past a comfort zone, ask us to be more visible, or risk failure. And that's just as valuable to look at and consider. So it becomes a really powerful question. Is this a rest signal or a push through signal? And frankly, that's a talk for another time, I think, because that's a very nuanced experience and one that I'm only just now myself starting to really recognize and explore. So, more details about that soon. But what happened for me is this. And I hope that if you leave with anything from this episode, it's something that helps you develop a practice that nourishes you and naturally builds on itself the way that mine did. I went through the process of creating a micro goal and then removing barriers as I noticed them popping up in order to create sustainable, healthy habits for myself. And that process is really important with any habit you're trying to build. No matter how good your intentions are, little obstacles or big obstacles will come along. Things that make you forget or just make it harder to follow through on. And the work is in noticing those little obstacles and breaking them down one by one. That's the part we actually have control over, and it's how we win. So, looking at my yoga habit, for example, which is a massive keystone in everything that I do, everything that's good for me these days. I started my yoga habit by saying to myself, if nothing else, I'll just sit on my mat today. That's it. All I had to do was sit on the mat. And then I started noticing even the act of unrolling and re-rolling my yoga mat had become an excuse to avoid it, or I'd forget altogether because the mat was tucked away somewhere. And by the time I thought about it, the day had already run away from me, especially with a little kid in the mix. So I recognized that as a barrier and decided to remove it. I made my yoga mat a permanent fixture in the living room. It's kind of like a rug now. Now, that way, I didn't have to unroll it every time. It was just there, ready for me to sit down on. Every morning, I'd walk across it, pause, sit down, and take a breath. Sometimes I'd feel good to stretch a little bit just because I was already there. And once that became second nature, I started using a new app that I'd found that made it really super easy to set a very short practice, very specific practice, did not take any brain space other than pressing the start button. Whereas other apps that I had found and explored were, you'd have to scroll through, do I want to do abs and legs? This one's 20 minutes. I only have 15. And you were kind of limited with that. But this app that I found that I really love, not an affiliate for them, but go check out Down Dog. They're wonderful. This made it super easy, and I was able to set it for a 5-minute practice. And that's manageable because I was already doing a few minutes on my own anyway, and now it's just giving me the structure. And I cycled through good days when it was really easy to roll right into the practice, and others when I'd get really distracted. Maybe something came up with my business, or I'd grab my phone first thing and lose focus and lose the train tracks of where my day was intended on going. And when that happened, I started recognizing that as another barrier. Just like rolling and unrolling my mat was an excuse, the day getting swept away from me, or picking up my phone before doing the yoga practice, or starting to work on work stuff or anything like that, this is another barrier. And so I set a new goal. to get on the mat before checking my phone or dealing with anything work-related. And of course, even with this and even working with each additional barrier, I still had good days and hard days. But the oscillation, the back and forth, having a good day, having a tougher day, is totally normal. It's part of the process. And I think that we get stuck in this idea of once I start a habit, if I miss a day or if I miss 2 days, it's totally gone and it's so much harder to get back on the train. We get discouraged really easily when we forget a new habit instead of using that as feedback for what needs adjusting to make it easier. Maybe it's waking up 5 minutes earlier. Maybe it's laying out the clothes on your end of your bed ahead of time so you can get your fitness clothes on and make you feel all good. I don't know about you, but just putting on athletic wear in the morning makes me want to live up to the clothing's purpose. Now, over time for me, this evolved in so many ways. These days, I usually get a 30-minute practice in. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes 45. And occasionally, I get a long class at my favorite studio, which is always a treat. But it did not happen overnight. It came through a lot of little recalibrations along the way, moving up from sitting on the mat for 1 minute, sitting on the mat and starting a 5-minute practice to incrementally increasing it slowly. And the key is consistency. But consistency is easiest when it is ridiculously easy to start. And of course, I did not begin my yoga journey with the goal of doing a 5-minute daily practice. I probably would have scoffed at that. I wanted an hour every single morning because that was just what was in my brain of what is reasonable or what the attainable or what the achievement would be for me, right? But even 5 years later of being consistent with this, because I started small and stayed consistent, I have built something sustainable that truly supports me right where I am, even if it's only 30 minutes. So let's circle this back. How does this actually relate to burnout and how I finally got myself out of it? Because that was the original question, right? How did I actually get myself out of burnout? And like I said before, I don't think anyone really gets out of burnout. It's not a destination. It's something we kind of have to keep at bay with consistent practices that nourish both our physical and emotional bodies. And that often means developing new habits or letting go of old ones. And that's the hardest part, especially in a culture that glorifies all or nothing thinking. And we are going to experience this all over again with the coming new year. And so before we get into that mindset of these new year resolutions and all of that stuff, hopefully this will kind of come full circle for you and help you set the intention of 2026 not being so ridden with these big things that we have for ourselves and ultimately kind of sabotaging them. Now, let's look at you individually, right? Because it's not going to be just one specific thing. There's so many things that we can do for ourselves, but you in particular, your burnout experience or your chronic fatigue or whatever it looks like for you might benefit most from getting an extra hour of sleep each night. It might benefit from modifying your nutrition in a specific way or adding a supplement that supports your energy in one way or another. It might ease up from journaling, maybe getting the thoughts out of your head and onto paper so that they stop looping as pain. You could do yoga, jog, meditate, take walks, breathe intentionally, try hypnotherapy, or drink more water. The list goes on and on and on, right? But here's where so many of us get stuck, and where I used to get stuck too. Back in my 20s, I had this idea that I either did all of the good things or I'd stay in pain and exhaustion forever. And that's the trap, right? The secret is it starts with one, just one. And it's not even one specific thing. I really want to make that clear. It actually doesn't necessarily even matter what it is that you choose when it comes down to it, as long as you are consistent with it. So let's get more into detail here. One habit that feels right for you, and one that specifically feels like it could make the most positive impact for you, and most importantly, one that comes with the least resistance, because resistance kills momentum faster than anything else. And for me, as someone who grew up with chronic pain and childhood obesity, movement in particular was never my friend. My first habit couldn't be physical. It just came with way too much resistance, way too much subconscious sabotage. No matter how much I wanted it on a conscious level to work, my subconscious mind was not going to let me have that. So, truth be told, even though I started talking about yoga, my yoga habit wasn't even the first one I successfully built. I started and stopped yoga more times than I can count. And it's simply the habit I'm most proud of now because of how hard it was for me to implement. My first real good for me habit implementation was actually something much smaller. Simply drinking a 4-ounce glass of water first thing in the morning. So it was just a couple of gulps. So simple. I'd fill a glass right before bed and leave it on my nightstand. And I don't know about you, but I've always had this burst of motivation right before I go to sleep where I think tomorrow's going to be amazing. I'm going to wake up and do all the things. So running with that energy, I'd set the water out while I was in that optimistic state, leaving it right there for me so I could see it in the morning. I would just drink it as I walked to the bathroom, and that's it. And sure, some days I forgot, but it was the habit with the least resistance for me. And that's what made it work and allowed me to be consistent with it. So I want to encourage you to figure out your version of that, something that would make a positive impact in your life if you did it consistently, and then shrink it down into the tiniest, easiest version possible. So maybe you want to start your day with affirmations. Write them on a sticky note and put it right where you'll see first thing, like next to your toothbrush or even on the wall across from the toilet. Maybe you want to journal each night. So keep a journal by your bed and commit to writing only one sentence. That's all you have to do, even if it's simply, I don't know what to write today. Maybe you want to start a movement practice. Lay out a mat, an exercise mat, in a visible spot and just sit on it like I did for a minute each day. That's all you have to do. And maybe after a week of getting consistent with remembering to sit on it, maybe you can add 10 reps of something simple. That's it. Really, the point isn't the reps or the calories burned or the amount of sentences you write in your journal or the amount of water you drink every morning or whatever quantity is associated with your habit. It's building the habit of starting, because starting is actually the hardest part. And once you have one positive micro habit running consistently, it starts to spill over into other parts of your life. You might notice that you naturally want to build on it and add more time or whatever the quantity is for it, for example. Or maybe you feel drawn to try something new because you have more energy or you've been exposed to an extra layer of what this opens up for you. You might even find community around that new habit or discover new goals that never felt possible before. And that's the snowball effect. One small thing, like 2 gulps of water in the morning, can shift the entire trajectory of your life over time. Hey friend, real quick, I'm interrupting this episode to share something that's made a huge difference in my health and my ability to actually rest, which is kind of the foundation for everything we talk about here. Now, you've heard my story, and you probably know that I used to be a chronic insomniac. Like, my eyes were super tired, brain totally wired, body aching all the time, just laying there for hours wide awake, even though I was completely exhausted. And even when I did fall asleep, I'd wake up with that classic cortisol spike at 3 a.m. and couldn't fall back to sleep again. I honestly just thought that was how my body worked. But everything changed when I started using Swanwick blue light blocking glasses. I was in a program that emphasized 3 pillars of health, and sleep was one of those non-negotiables. And once I understood what blue light was doing to my nervous system and circadian rhythm, it made so much sense. So here's the science real quick. Blue light, especially from screens and overhead lighting, suppresses melatonin production. And it doesn't take much. Even small amounts of exposure after sunset can delay the release of melatonin by hours, making it so much harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. But that's just the beginning. That same disruption also affects your cortisol rhythm, your ability to regulate inflammation, your blood sugar, your digestion, and even your tissue repair. Now, you're a body worker, so you know sleep is when the real healing happens for you and your clients. So now I wear my Swanwick glasses every night starting at around 5 p.m., especially if I'm leading a Zoom call or working late, and the difference is wild. I fall asleep within 30 minutes of starting to read in bed, I sleep so much deeper, and I wake up with a lot less pain. And most importantly, I feel like me again. And just to take it a step further, I even swapped my bathroom light bulbs to their amber toned bulbs so that my evening routine doesn't confuse my body into thinking it's midday. This is one of the easiest, most effective upgrades I've made to my nervous system regulation and overall healing. It's super low effort, high reward. Honestly, it kind of feels like cheating. So if you're someone who struggles with winding down or you find yourself wired at night even though you're bone tired, give these a try. There's a link in the show notes to grab your own pair. Okay, back to the episode. And the coolest thing about this is that once you do something so stupid, easy, accessible, and achievable for you, you start to build the belief in yourself so that when you do decide to take on something else, like me for when I started actually doing yoga more consistently, I believed I could because I was able to initiate a different habit before, and I simply applied those same tools to something else that I had a little bit more resistance around. And that muscle makes all the difference, that muscle of believing that you can. And I know all of this because I have lived it. I promise you, for me, it was not a specific one single thing that changed everything for me. It was the consistency behind the first one, which then snowballed to allowing me to develop consistency behind all of the practices that I have either done consistently, stick with consistently now, or have tried for a while to see if they actually work for me. Every single thing I've tried, journaling, nutrition, movement practices, hypnotherapy, affirmations, meditation, whatever I've tried, they all worked when I stuck with them. And so that's your invitation now. I want to invite you to pick one thing that feels exciting or simple, make it really tiny, really, really tiny, and stick with it. And I know that all of that might sound so simple, almost too simple, but this is where I want to kind of hit home and remind you about my current obsession and mission for body workers right now, which is hypnotherapy. And this truly can help shift this piece of resistance that I think a lot of us are working with. Because even with the best intentions, our subconscious mind can and frankly will derail us whenever it gets the opportunity. That's why some of these habits can feel absolutely impossible to maintain or even get started. Even something as small as starting the day with a sip of water can feel completely out of reach sometimes. And I get it. I've absolutely been there. I have been that person with a list of excuses as to why that is not possible for me, no matter what the thing is. For me, it finally all came together when hypnotherapy became the consistent thing in my life. And really, just to give you a little example of how that mattered for me, I had reached a point where I had stepped so far out of what I had ever allowed for myself to be possible in terms of health, happiness, and success. I was in a really good place with all of those things, and I had never been there before. And I slid down a ridiculous self-sabotage water slide because of it. And for a good chunk, it seemed like everything was falling apart. But what was really happening was that I had stepped into a new version of my life, one that was actually good, maybe a little too good for what my subconscious thought was safe. So my mind did what it knew how to do. It hit the brakes. It said, nope, we don't know this version of your life. It's unfamiliar. It might not be safe. And it can look like all kinds of things. For me, at this particular time of my life, it was literal chaos. I tore a ligament in my ankle. And one of the other really big things that happened at that time, in addition to a deluge of other things, a scam roofing contractor removed the roof from my new house and left us roofless for almost 8 weeks, right around the holidays too. That was really fun. And a bunch of other personal things were unraveling at the same time. But to put it simply, everything was crashing down around me. But really, it was just my subconscious trying to keep me in the familiar, trying to keep me safe. Isn't that interesting? And when I started using hypnotherapy around this same time, everything shifted for me. It helped me and allowed me to keep the good habits that I had developed going. It helped me stay regulated. And it allowed me to work through those old limiting beliefs that kept me in self-sabotage mode, that really tied me down to sabotaging whatever goodness came into my life. And once I started using it consistently, I noticed more and more quote unquote magic than with any other tool I'd ever tried. And the reason it works so well is because it doesn't just change your thoughts, it changes how safe your subconscious feels with success, with ease, with being seen, with enforcing a boundary, with whatever it is that you need to work on. It lets you witness a version of yourself who's confident raising your rates, who's comfortable enforcing your boundaries, who's able to handle a full client load without crashing afterward, maybe even stepping into leadership, becoming a teacher or an employer. And when you witness that, it allows you to see that it's possible and that it's not as dangerous to your subconscious mind. And when your subconscious mind is on board, those old triggers that might send you into an experience of burnout don't hit the same way anymore. For example, this most recent fibromyalgia flare I had, I was looking at it because I'm like, wow, where did this come from? I've got such a different look at where my symptoms come from these days. And I had just taken on a new side gig that I had not necessarily developed the confidence in myself around being capable of doing it. And it's really interesting. The same week I started this project is when my fibromyalgia flared so bad. And in looking at it in retrospect and just giving it the space to just say what it needed to say and doing all of my things that I know how to take care of myself, being able to look at that and seeing like, oh, I'm at another level where I'm trying something where I don't feel like I've been very good at it before, but this time I really want to try again. And it's scary to try again. Therefore, my subconscious mind was like, nope, get sick, have a fibromyalgia flare, just quit that thing. You're not going to do it anyway. So just, if you're going to fail, at least it's because you're sick and not because you're a failure overall. And yeah, just moving through that and being like, thank you, subconscious mind. You're trying to keep me from experiencing that sense of failure again. But this is important to me and I'm willing to maybe fail a little bit if that's what it takes for me to learn. And we're just going to do this anyway. And I'll share in upcoming episodes more and more of my process around that and working through the emotional tie to my burnout experience, because I am really exploring that a lot more these days. And I'm excited to share more with you guys around how that transpires for my own healing journey as well. But the hypnotherapy is really what cracked all of that for me in such a beautiful way. And that's why I created the free hypnotherapy experience for all of you listeners. It's linked in the show notes in case you haven't checked it out yet. And if you have, remember, it's intended to be a daily resource. This is something that compounds over time. This track, it's actually 3 tracks, one of which you can choose from based off of where you are, is made specifically for body workers, and it's designed to support you through the 3 primary challenges that we face in this profession. And the best part is it's completely passive. If you've got a lazy pants subconscious mind like mine, all you have to do is pop on your headphones and lay back and relax and listen. And it's kind of hard to have resistance around that. And then inside the Sustainable Body Worker membership, there's a ton of other hypnotherapy tracks, everything from building confidence around raising rates or setting boundaries with clients, calling in ideal clients, strengthening intuition, grounding before a session. It goes on. And I add a new one each month based on what the community is currently moving through, which is really fun to create those custom experiences for everyone. In addition to that, there's also a ton of step-by-step business strategy courses in there. I teach you how to make money online through continuing education classes or through creating courses for your clients. Or maybe you want to hire your first employee. There is a very detailed step-by-step guide there, and so much more, like creating high-level programs for your clients, as well as masterclasses taught by so many amazing industry leaders. There's just so much in this membership. So go ahead and click the link if you want to check it out and learn all about it. I don't want to waste your time here, but I do want to say my favorite piece of the Sustainable Body Worker membership is the community. We all come together twice a month. We support each other, we hold each other accountable, and we're all building sustainable practices rooted in real values. And it really is a beautiful thing to witness. We are a group of practitioners choosing sustainability over hustle and self-trust over burnout. It's very special. So whether you decide to explore the membership, try it out, there's no long-term commitments or anything like that, or even if you just want to start with the free hypnotherapy track, my hope is that this episode helps you feel the inspiration to take one small, compassionate step toward your own sustainability with a micro habit that you can start today. Because when it comes down to it, consistency does not mean perfection. It just means you keep coming back to yourself. So take care of your body, be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to The Sustainable Body Worker. If something resonated for you today, grab your free breakthrough session, which includes a custom hypnotherapy track to help you unlock the next level. Grab it now with the link in the show notes. And to hear more, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.